They say in the Mafia, you either rule with fear or die by it. In the heart of New York, one man tried to do both. His name was Paul Castellano. To the world, he was a businessman. To the underworld, he was the Pope. His rise was built on silence, loyalty, and blood. And his fall, which is on betrayal, bullets, and stake. Under the golden light of a fading New York evening, the camera pans slowly over Brooklyn. The skyline glows. Voices fade into the hum of traffic. A narrator begins softly. In the heart of New York, behind butcher shops and concrete towers, lived a man who believed he could turn crime into business. His name was Paul Castellano. To some, he was Big Paulie. To others, he was the Pope. His story is one of ambition, betrayal, and a violent end that changed the Mafia forever. Paul Castellano was born on June 26, 1915 in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. His parents, Giuseppe and Concetta Castellano, were Sicilian immigrants. His father worked as a butcher, a man known for his hands that smelled of meat and iron. Paul grew up in the midst of working-class life, surrounded by the whispers of men who talked in low tones about the family. He dropped out of school in the 8th grade. His education, from that point, came from the streets and from his father's shop, where business, loyalty, and silence were the true lessons. At the age of 19, Paul was arrested in Hartford, Connecticut, for robbing a haberdasher. He spent 3 months in jail. He refused to name his accomplices. That silence earned him respect among the men who valued omerta, the code of silence. When he returned to Brooklyn, he found doors opening into the world of organized crime. In 1937, Paul married Nina Mano. Together, they had 4 children. But behind the life of family dinners and business dealings, Paul was already deep in the shadow world of the Mangano crime family, later known as the Gambino family. He became an associate under Albert Anastasia, a man both feared and admired. When Anastasia was murdered, Paul's cousin and brother-in-law, Carlo Gambino, rose to power. That connection would shape Paul's destiny. Through the 1940s and 1950 seconds, Castellano blended the life of a businessman with that of a mobster. He worked in the meat industry, learned the trade, and began controlling distribution routes. He also took a stake in gambling and construction. He wasn't the kind of mobster who stood on the corner flashing guns. He was calm, calculating, and spoke of percentages rather than bullets. In his eyes, crime should look respectable. In 1957, the Mafia held a secret national meeting in Appalachian, New York. Police raided the gathering and arrested dozens of mobsters. Paul was among them. The headlines confirmed what America long suspected, that organized crime was real, structured, and powerful. That event put Castellano on the FBI radar, but it also raised his prestige within the underworld. As the years went by, Paul built his empire. He invested in Dial Poultry and other meat companies. He influenced construction and trucking unions, especially Teamsters Local 282. He controlled the concrete business in New York. If you were pouring concrete for a skyscraper in Manhattan, chances were that Castellano's men were part of the deal. His Staten Island mansion, built like a replica of the White House, symbolized his power. Behind its marble walls, he hosted meetings, ate lavish dinners, and discussed million-dollar contracts. Paul disliked the street life of drugs and open violence. He banned his men from selling narcotics, arguing it brought too much attention from the government. Many of his capos saw him as old-fashioned and out of touch. But Castellano saw himself differently. He believed he was transforming the Mafia from a collection of thugs into an empire of businessmen. Yet, in trying to turn gangsters into gentlemen, he created resentment. The men who lived by fear and power began to see him as weak. He preferred wearing robes and slippers at home, and that image clashed with the hard men who followed him. Still, his influence grew. When Carlo Gambino died in 1976, Paul Castellano was chosen as his successor. That decision was not popular. Many believed the underboss, Aniello Della Croce, should have become boss. Della Croce, a traditional mobster loyal to the streets, accepted the decision, but not everyone shared his restraint. The Gambino family split into 2 camps. One followed Castellano, drawn to money and business. The other followed Della Croce, drawn to power and respect. As boss, Castellano expanded control over labor unions and construction. He demanded a percentage from every deal. He modernized the family's operations, insisting on reports and structure. But his leadership style was cold and distant. He treated soldiers like employees, not brothers. The more he tried to run things like a company, the less his men felt like a family. In the early 1980s, law enforcement tightened its grip. The FBI placed a listening device inside Castellano's home. For months, agents listened to him talk about business, infidelity, and criminal operations. The recordings revealed not only his power, but also his arrogance. In 1984, he was indicted for racketeering, extortion, and murder. A year later, another indictment followed, this time under the RICO Act, connecting him to the Mafia Commission itself. While Castellano fought legal battles, his enemies were growing restless. John Gotti, a street capo known for his temper and ambition, began to plot. Gotti's crew hated Castellano's leadership. They wanted more freedom, especially to profit from drugs. They also felt insulted when Castellano skipped Delacroce's funeral in December 1985, claiming he feared arrest. To Gotti, that was unforgivable. The old man had lost the loyalty of his soldiers. On December 16, 1985, Castellano and his driver, Thomas Bellotti, arrived at Sparks Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan. The cold wind cut through the streets. They stepped out of their car, unaware that several shooters were waiting nearby. As Castellano opened his door, shots erupted. He fell instantly, his lifeless body hitting the pavement. Bellotti died beside him. Passersby screamed as chaos filled the street. John Gotti watched from a car nearby, satisfied that the throne was his. Within days, he became the new boss of the Gambino family. Castellano's assassination sent shockwaves through the Mafia world. It was a public execution in one of New York's busiest areas. The commission had not approved it, but by then, tradition no longer mattered. The Mafia had entered a new, violent era. Paul Castellano was buried in Moravian Cemetery, Staten Island. His death ended an age when the Mafia tried to look respectable. He left behind wealth, controversy, and lessons on power. To some, he was the last of the business-minded dons. To others, he was a man who forgot where he came from. His story is a reflection of ambition that reached too high. A man who wanted legitimacy in a world built on crime. A boss who dreamed of turning the Mafia into a corporation, but paid the price for trying. The city moved on, but the echoes of his rise and fall still haunt New York's history. Subscribe for more stories that reveal the real faces behind power, crime, and legacy.